Hello everyone, for the audience on our Facebook Live channel as well as Clubhouse. This is our next episode of AI Tech Talk Live, and today we will be focusing on Generative Adversarial Network, or more commonly known as GAN. And if for people who don't know what GAN is, it's okay, we'll talk a little bit about it and then we'll take your questions. But in summary, deepfakes are based on GANs, or Generative Adversarial Network. I will talk about that as well. Just a reminder, we are Skive. We build machines that feel, specifically RoboMetrics machine. And yes, we are absolutely hiring both on the technology side as well as on the non-technical side. So please reach out to me directly or leave a Facebook message or reach out to us on Clubhouse or any means possible, any and every means possible to get in touch with us. Okay, so I have a bunch of questions that I've received so far, and if I get any new questions, we'll try to answer that as well. We'll start with the basic principle of Generative Adversarial Network, or GANs. I mean, what exactly is GAN? It's a AI/ML technique, and specifically that involves a generative network called generating network and a discriminative network called discriminative network. So these are the two pieces. So let's use these. So we have a generative network that generates candidates or images or stuff that we want to generate, and you have the discriminative network that will evaluate what the generator creates. And that's the process that this actually uses to train a system. To some extent, we are talking about doing something similar to unsupervised learning, but it's a combination of supervised and unsupervised learning. So the actual contest operates in terms of data distribution. So typically the generative network, which is this part, learns to map from a latent space to data distribution of interest. So just in a simple way is that the generative network does not have the real stuff or the real images. So it will generate artificial images, or it will generate images that are a little bit different than the real stuff. Then you have this guy, which is the discriminative network. It evaluates the images that's being generated by our first guy, the generative network. The discriminative network actually has the real stuff. So it is the one which will have the trained images or real images of, let's say, people, or it could be cars, for example. And that's what really happens, that there's a contest going between these two where this guy tries to fool this one. And so what that means is that this guy, the first one, the generative network, will try to increase the error in an image. And in this process of gamification, where one is trying to fool the other, and the other say, no, that's wrong, that's not a real image. And then this makes some changes and sends the image back to this guy again, and they'll say, oh, maybe you are right, this is a real image. And because of this process, ultimately what ends up happening is that you come up with an image that looks real, but actually not real. And that's the whole process of GAN. GAN has very different use cases, and that's the second one of the questions that was asked. What are the different use cases? Deepfakes is one of the more prominent use cases that we have seen, and we'll talk a little bit more about it. The next second question was, how is it different from unsupervised learning and supervised learning? As I said, that we have these two guys, and these two guys to some extent are manifestation of one of these learning algorithms, supervised or unsupervised. So you can even think of GAN as a combination of multiple of these learning algorithms to achieve a specific goal. Our next question was, what are deepfakes, and what is the relationship of deepfakes with GANs? Deepfakes are based on GANs, or Generative Adversarial Network. And the way of deepfake is that it looks like a real person, but it's actually not. Just to describe deepfakes in one sentence, it's using deep learning to generate fake images and videos. And when we say fake, it could be for a good use or it could be for a bad use. It could be both. And that's where deepfakes, where deep learning, the deep and the fakes as in fakes, that's where it comes from. And there are many applications and use cases for deepfakes. Avatars in social media is one of them. New virtual personalities is another one of them. Cyber espionage has become, believe it or not, very common in the government, where you are coming up with these deep fakes as videos or images, and that gets people to believe that this is the real person. There were instances where there were fake LinkedIn profiles of people who looked real, but they were actually not. Hollywood movie production is a very good example of where deepfakes can be used and are being used, because now you cannot do real in-person shooting in a lot of instances. Adaptive messaging is one of them. It's not that common right now, but as we progress, I'm sure we'll have our own avatar, which actually looks like us in pretty much every possible way, and we can use them in our social media, for example, on Facebook or on LinkedIn or on even Twitter or TikTok. Dating, I heard, is becoming interesting when it comes to deepfakes as well, and a lot of the actual photos and visuals are of not real person. So that's probably the bad side of deepfakes. Language translation in real time is another very interesting, which deviates from the more common use case of using images or generating images or videos using deepfakes. You can use the same technique for doing real-time translation or language translation. Our next question is, what are the ethical considerations of deepfakes? I mentioned to you some of the good use cases of deepfakes or GANs. Movie production, virtual avatars. Marketing is also one of the very good use cases. Then there are also bad cases, which is cyber espionage. And I think that's the bottom line, that for any technology, especially when we're talking about AI technology, the ethical, transparency, responsibility, and social economic considerations. The fact that you could do something using a piece of technology, in this case GANs, does not mean you should be doing it. AI needs to be used in a much more responsible way, and I think that's the bottom line when it comes to deepfakes, that both responsibility of the creator for making sure that it's not being used in a way where he or she didn't meant it, and secondly, what is the social economic impact a deepfake could actually have in a society. So if you're looking at making a deepfake of a politician, it may affect a lot of people. Is it ethical to do that? And the answer is probably no. And there is no hard and fast rule, or there is no threshold or a line when a deepfake become okay and when it does not, because well, it's still marketing, and some aspect of marketing has a huge impact, some actually don't. Our next question is about the commercialization of deepfakes. What are your thoughts on commercializing deepfakes and GAN technologies? Many of us may have actually seen so many of these companies that are coming up that use that more or less is taking the base algorithm, doing some sort of learning by having additional data or images and trying to commercialize that. The interesting part is that none of them are doing anything that's revolutionary or is much different. What that means, it could be very easily be replicated. The actual deepfake algorithm or the generative adversarial network algorithm is also more or less similar. And all of them are using the same algorithm, which is available to anyone. And that's also the good side and the bad side of it. The good side is that you can commercialize this in a very easy way, and the bad side is that it could be commercialized in a very easy way, so it's very easy for anyone to replicate that. And it's not a surprise that there's tens of companies who have been using it, both small or big. I mean, if you think about small companies, Synthesia is actually one of them, which focus on both businesses and organizations. You have Gigapixel AI, Modulati is there, Mio is there, and there's many, many more. Rosebuild is one of them. And what all of them is trying to do is they have different form factors or different services. Some of them will customize your avatar. Some of them will provide you a platform where you could customize it, and they will license this platform. Some of them will actually provide you the full solution, A to Z, where you tell them that you need a virtual avatar, you need a virtual star, and they will create it for you. What they're banking on the fact is that this technology cannot be replicated, or somebody else may not be able to do that. And I think that's a wrong assumption, because the core technology is the same. There's also nothing really novel when it comes to the infrastructure that they're using to drive this. Infrastructure is a commodity. You could buy cloud services from Amazon, Google, Microsoft, Oracle, and all of them will be able to drive any one of these. I also believe that none of these companies that I mentioned, and there's hundreds more, have enough volume to be building a sustainable system. But at the same time, I do see there is a specific need of commercializing this, because there are customers who could use it. But the flip side is also that why would you want to go and buy something which you can replicate it yourself, especially if you're a big company? Samsung is just one example. I'm sure other bigger companies like Microsoft is also using GANs in an interesting way, where companies like Samsung are creating their own avatars using GANs. So why would they want to work with a smaller startup in this area when that smaller startup cannot provide that delta or that replicated value to them? Okay, with that, let's see if you have any other questions. And I believe that was our last question. Just to summarize what I covered today, I gave you a very high-level human definition of what a generative adversarial network is. So when you think about GAN, just think about these two guys fighting each other to try to create something interesting. That's what GAN is. We talked about deepfakes, which use GANs. We talked about the ethical consideration of deepfakes. And we also talked about how there's no clear boundary when a deepfake should be used and it should not be used. And then we talked about commercializing deepfakes. We'll be back next week. Until then, if you have any questions, or if you want to know more about deepfakes, or if you would like to talk to me, please reach out to us either through Facebook, LinkedIn, and we are definitely on Clubhouse. Thanks, and I will see you next time.